Welcome to our City Board of Directors agenda meeting for February 11, 2020. This is our opportunity to review our agenda for our formal board meeting that will be held on February the 18th. We have a couple presentations today. Mr. Manager, if you would, conduct the presentation on our retirement presentations.
I think there are a few people who would love an early retirement program, but today we're celebrating two individuals at a traffic court. First, we would like to recognize Miss Gloria Carter. Miss Carter, would you please come forward? Miss Carter has been with the city for 33 years. Her awards and honors include Traffic Court Employee of the Month in June of 2000, also in May of 2001, Traffic Court Excellence Award in March of 2002, and Employee of the Year in 2008. I really love both these employees' favorite memories of working for the city. And so for Ms. Carter, hers were the luncheons and the health fairs. So those are always important ways of saying thank you to our employees. And our plans for retirement include to enjoy life to the fullest and take one day at a time. At this point, let me ask Judge Vic Fleming to come forward and make a few comments.
Thank you, Bruce. It's always a pleasure to speak on behalf of great employees, and I'm sorry that Ollie is not here right now, Ollie Church, but Ollie and Gloria came to our department by way of the police department. They were originally in the police department, spent a majority of their career entering data from the citations issued by the police officers. Not an easy task, I assure you. From making sure the tickets were entered timely to making sure that all the information was correct, it was indeed a very valuable service to us, and these women always took pride in making sure that theirs was a job well done. In more recent years, they literally have been the voice of traffic court because they've been the primary people responsible for taking customers' calls on the phones. And on many occasions, I and other supervisors have been contacted by folks who wanted to do nothing other than brag on what a good experience they had had over the phone dealing with Gloria or Ollie. This is a great accomplishment when you consider the number of people who make their calls to our office. They have been a real blessing in our department. They've always been kind. They had a great attitude toward everyone that they come into contact with, always concerned about the well-being of their fellow employees, and always willing to tackle any job that we might throw their way with a smile on their face and pleasant remarks. In fact, they probably know my grandchildren in some way better than I do because they're always coming by to look at recent pictures. While we have some people who allegedly are going to take their jobs over, they really are irreplaceable. We're already missing their smiling faces and their sweet dispositions. We have been blessed and will continue to be blessed, and we'll miss them forever. So thank you both for being what you've been, and wish you the best in your retirement. Thank you.
Gloria, on behalf of the city, thank you for many decades of service, and God bless in your retirement. Enjoy.
Thank you.
Take a quick picture. And as Gloria comes to the podium, if our colleagues from traffic court would come up and would stand up and
I'm thankful to be here tonight, and I just want to thank Judge Fleming. I've enjoyed all the years that I've worked for the city, and I learned a whole lot over the years. And again, I just want to thank the judge. He's a very good judge to work for, and he has a real good staff, and I enjoyed working with them as well. So I thank them and thank you.
And Mayor, we'll work with the judge's office to reschedule Mrs. Church.
Thank you so much. Well, Ms. Gloria, we want you to know how much we appreciate your servant leadership for these many, many years. It does not go unnoticed, and we are greatly appreciative of you. Thank you so much. Seeing no other presentations, we will now turn to modifications. We have 3 modifications to add. The first 2 deal with the execution of easements for land at the Little Rock Port Authority, and the third authorizing a The third authorizes an actuarial evaluation to be performed for benefit increases for the members of the Little Rock Police Pension and Relief Funds, which is now administered by LOPFI. Are there any questions for those 3 additions? Seeing none, we'll move forward with the consent agenda. Board members, are there any questions regarding items 1 through 5? Director Hines.
Mayor, just more of a point of clarification, since it was added at my request from a constituent member, Major Keith Dover. Resolution 3 is we're a little bit behind the times. North Little Rock has already passed a resolution to recognize the Broadway Bridge as the Veterans Memorial Bridge with signage. It was something that was promised when the county and everyone we decided to build it, but somebody recognized that we had never memorialized that, and there's no signage on it recognizing our veterans. So this would be to formally acknowledge that. I think the State Highway Department requires us, the City of North Little Rock, and the county all to pass resolutions in order to be able to put that signage up, and there's also a plaque. Major Keith Dover from the American Legion Post will be here next week. He can answer any questions if anybody's got any.
Thank you so much, Director Hines, for your leadership in that. Any other questions for items 1 through 5? Questions for items 1 through 5? Seeing none, board members, are there any questions for items 6 through 9? Questions for items 6 through 9? Seeing none, board members, are there any questions from items 10 through 12? Items 10 through 12. Director Richardson.
Yes, Mayor, as I see this, I'm just thinking about how we address policy. In a way, we're going to have a policy meeting after this agenda meeting, and I guess with respect to the whole notion of policies, have we had any policy discussion on this beyond just his initial introduction?
Yes, sir. If you will recall, well, which item are you referencing?
I'm just looking at 11 and 12, I think.
Yes, sir. If you will recall, and I'll give a brief background, items 11 and 12 emanated from the request of this board in 2018, on December the 3rd, 2018, in regards to the former government that were centered around the 2018 campaign cycle. And so out of that process, this particular board decided on December 3rd, 2018 to institute a former government study group. When the election was decided on December 4th, 2018, and then this administration took into office in January 1, 2019, we worked with this board to institute the former government study group. This board then, the 7 members of ward directors appointed individual ward members to be a part of the former government study group. The at-large city directors and myself worked to appoint the 3 at-large members that were a part of this particular board. They met somewhere close to 7 to 8 months to go over this particular form of government. They also had several different community meetings as well, and deliberated and developed their list of recommendations. And out of those list of recommendations, we are now forwarding. That board asked, they presented to this board, both in I believe in a policy meeting, their findings and their reports, and the report asked that after they spent their 8 months of time and effort and volunteer, that we take up their recommendations as in ordinances for the board to consider. And that is what you have before you today.
Well, I guess let me add a little bit more specificity. I guess my question centered around that 7-8 month planning process. And that came, the impetus for that really was one of my colleagues' desire to put the at-large positions on the general ballot in 2018, so we wouldn't have to have any special elections to talk about these issues. But I guess let me get a little bit more specific, Mayor. Have we had a policy conversation on the results of that plan that you just mentioned? Have we had any discussion of that? I don't remember any.
Yes, we did. And the policy discussions when, and can't remember the particular date, but it was at a policy meeting. The former government study group came and presented their recommendations before the board, and the board did do Q&A. So that was.
I think I missed that night.
Yes, sir.
At home watching you guys having fun with popcorn.
Well, I'm sure you were out doing.
Yeah, thank you.
The people's work.
Clearing it up for me, Mayor. Thank you, sir.
And so, just so everyone's aware, every recommendation, that was feasible has been adhered to in this response. There is one recommendation after working with our city attorney as it relates to the 40% rule for the ward members due to some concerns with the Voters' Right Act. We have decided not, based on the city attorney's opinion, not to move forward with that particular ordinance. And so outside of that, so that the 40% rule is not being considered for the ward members and or the regional districts to protect the integrity of the Voters' Rights Act based on the city attorney's opinion. And so that being said, the only thing that is available now from the former government study group is what you have before you in ordinances 11 and 12. So just wanted everyone to be sure about that.
Well, that's another one, Mayor. I think that your point about the plan, the study group, and all the information that we had and we garnered from them. My question, Tom, this is more for you. As we start looking at talking about actions or authorities or ability to hire or fire, are we allowed to have that conversation? Because during that full-time mayor's campaign, we did not change the form of government.
The answer is yes. I mean, y'all are the main legislative body of the city, and how you deal with the formation of the government's a legislative act.
Okay, I'm going to say the attorney out there. Yes or no, did we change the form of government in 2007?
Yes. Well, no.
Which one is it?
You changed the methodology. You changed the manner in which the authorities of the mayor could be exercised. It's on.
So you
the 2007 election made the mayor officially full-time and gave the mayor the authority over any matter that he wished to exercise that the city manager was currently exercising.
That I understand. A little bit more specific. Did we change the form of government, or did we just have a manager-council form of government with the mayor functioning at 100%, working 100% rather than 32 or whatever it was before? So did we actually change the government?
Not change from, there's only 3 forms of municipal government in Arkansas: the city administrator, the city manager, and the mayor council. We are still a city manager government and have been since 1957.
Thank you.
Director Adcock?
Yes, on item 11 and 12, are we going to have a presentation tonight?
We have members of the former government study group available to take Q&A. The chairperson of that group and many members of that group are here today.
I would like to have a presentation because it's been several months and everything.
Yes, ma'am.
And I would like to have a presentation on 11 and 12 either tonight or next week.
They're prepared tonight. Mr. Manager?
Mayor, and I don't know how long the conversation is. Ms. Church has arrived. If we could just take a pause.
Yes, out of point of order, we will transition to have the great opportunity to recognize Mrs. Church. And then we'll proceed back. Thank you so much, Mr. Manager.
Again, we want to recognize another longstanding employee. I said last week, or a few weeks ago, we had a 50-year employee. Today, we're recognizing one with 41 years total experience with the city. Ola Mae Church. Awards and honors include a Good Samaritan Award and Employee of the Month. And I've been doing this a long time, and I was the one that years ago said, I want to know what the favorite memory of working with the city is. And this will actually probably go to the top of the list. So when I asked Ola Mae what her favorite memory of working for the city is, when my coworkers and I were asked to participate in a suspect lineup, and the victim picked on one of them, my coworkers, as the suspect. I bet that was a bad day for that one. Her plans for retirement include working full-time in the ministry and spending time traveling with her family. This time, let me ask Judge Fleming to come back up.
Well, all the good remarks that I made earlier were about you as well as your co-worker, Ollie. And all I can tell you is that we already miss you. We acknowledged earlier that you and Gloria were the voice of the city since you ran the phones for the last few years. And also we admired you and extolled your virtues for the wonderful work that you did in data entry when you first came on board, and how your great smile and great attitude were always a blessing to us, and that between the two of you knew more about my grandchildren than I do. So I wish you well in your retirement, and thank Bruce for letting me get up here and give you a hug.
Thank you, Judge.
And again, some of our colleagues are here. I think you got some family members here also. And Mr. Church, how are you doing? All right. Good, good. Sisters back there. Everybody stand up. Mr. Church, on behalf of the city, thank you for 41 years of outstanding service. We will miss you, and God bless in retirement.
Thank you.
Come around real quick and take a picture. And let you say a few words.
First off, I'd like to apologize for being late, and I just want to recognize our mayor, the Honorable Frank Scott Jr., and our city manager, Mr. Moore, and all of the board members. I just say I want to thank the Lord for giving me the opportunity to work for the city of Little Rock. It's a wonderful place to work. I started working in at the police department in 1979, and it was supposed to have been a 30-day job that I had there, but behold, 30 days turned into 41 years. And I want to thank my boss, Judge Fleming, for being such a wonderful guy, and I want to just thank all of you all, and may God bless you all.
Thank you so much, Ms. Church. We will now transition back. Mr. Rick Campbell, if you would, being the chairperson of the Former Government Study Group, please approach the podium. And if all the members from the Former Government Study Group that were able to make it tonight, I know all could not, but those that have been a part of the process, if you would, please stand. Thank you so much for being here. I know Mr. Campbell is going to speak on your behalf, but wanted to recognize you for being here, and we do appreciate you. Mr. Campbell.
Thank you, Mayor, and members of the board. And I am Rick Campbell, and I was privileged to serve as chair of this group. And before I say anything, I want to compliment Ms. Church, who just walked out. That was a great acceptance speech. That's what you're supposed to do. You know, acknowledge it and walk out. And so she did a terrific job, and what a wonderful city employee she was for us all. I want to, again, thank you for appointing us. We took our job, our jobs with a great deal of we accepted the responsibility and took it very seriously. And we did not want to fail to include any and every voice that appeared before us, both our experts and members of the public. We had all open meetings. And I want to compliment Emily Cox, one of your employees in the city manager's office, who did a terrific job of working with us for 8 months as we worked through this process. She was a wonderful asset to us all. Director Adcock, I was not going to make was not prepared, but I can talk about all of the recommendations that we made. We made 7 recommendations. They're in our report that we presented to the board on October the 25th, but I know 2 are before you this evening for your consideration. So I won't go through the other 5, but there are 7 recommendations for the board to consider. Yes, ma'am.
I would like for you to go over at least the 7.
Okay.
We have lots of people that listen at home as well as here in the audience, and some of them may have missed that evening, and I want them to understand what this is all about.
Okay, and I will do that. I will say that if you have the copies of our report that we presented to you, this begins on page 8 of our recommendations, goes on to page 9, where we kind of itemize each of those recommendations. The first was this minimum electoral requirement, and that was the 40% issue, which the board just heard from the mayor about, and that is we had recommended that to be elected candidates for city directors shall receive at least 40% of the votes from their respective election. That's no longer an issue before the board. Second, the board structure. We recommended that regional districts should be established to replace at-large positions. We'll talk about that in more detail in just a moment. Third, we talked about, we recommended board size, that the board be reduced from 7 wards and 3 at-large positions to 6 ward positions and 2 regional positions. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment also. Fourth, we talked about the mayor's authority to hire and remove the city manager and the city attorney. We'll discuss that in just a moment. Fifth, we recommended a citizen education effort, and that is that the city of Little Rock create and implement a citizen education program to equip and empower citizens to have equitable opportunities to participate in the political process. And we pointed to an effort in Missouri, one of the cities there in Missouri, and I apologize, can't remember which city that was, but there is a citizen education program there. And we thought that would be a good model for the city of Little Rock to follow. Sixth, we talked about a board orientation program that would ensure that all newly elected city officials receive a detailed service orientation to their specific role and responsibilities, along with a thorough organizational overview of city government. And then finally, we recommended a board retreat, and that is the mayor and the board would hold an annual retreat, which would include social, informational, and planning discussions that are memorialized in writing and subsequently considered for policy decisions and related actions, budgeting, and timetables. We felt, based on our conversations with one another, our experts and members of the public, that you as a group need to get together in a less formal atmosphere than in the boardroom at City Hall, and a retreat, an annual retreat where you spend some social time as well as some discussion policy time would be appropriate. That meeting, the retreat would be open to the press if the press wanted to attend. Nothing secret there. It's just really to put the board in a more informal, less structured time together. So those were the 7 items that we recommended. Are there any questions about those before we get to these particular
No, just more details on 2 or 3 of them.
Okay. With regard to the city manager and the city attorney, the 2007 ordinance, well, first of all, let me just preface all this by saying we separated out, and think it's important not only for us to do this, but for the board to do this, separate the people who currently hold these positions from this discussion that we had and from what would happen in the future. We literally separated those. We were just saying, okay, if we're recommending the best form of government for the city of Little Rock, what would that look like? And with regard to these positions, regardless of who fills those positions, we felt like these were appropriate recommendations. So with regard to the city manager and the city attorney, the 2007 ordinance already provides that the mayor has the authority to hire and to terminate these two officials. I mean, that's already, you know, that's already there. I mean, the mayor's already got that authority. The question is, you know, the input of the board in those hiring decisions. The 2000 and termination decisions. The 2007 ordinance says that the city manager is the chief administrative officer of the city and shall serve at the direction of the mayor. So that kind of puts that positionally, the city manager is below. If you had a staff study chart, you would have that line running from the mayor to the city manager, and the city manager is accountable to the mayor under the existing 2007 ordinance. So the issue really is, okay, what type of authority does the mayor have to hire or terminate the position of city manager? And we'll separate these out: city manager discussion and then city attorney discussion. With regard to the city manager, all we've really done is to say that the city manager's, the mayor's decision to hire and terminate the city manager position is final, unless this board by a 2/3 vote overrides that decision. Today, you know, that decision is really, it's a majority vote, subject to the approval, majority vote of the board. Under our recommendation, what we're saying is that the mayor's decision is final to hire and terminate unless the board by a 2/3 vote overrides that decision. We also said that the mayor, with regard to the city manager, the mayor alone would conduct the annual review of the city manager. Again, if you think about the staff chart I just described, I mean, that would be appropriate. The city manager is in line under the authority of the mayor. So all this is consistent with that type of authority that would be vested in the mayor. The rationale for this proposed change is that in our public meetings in our public forum meetings, as well as in our discussions with our experts and among ourselves during the 8-month period, it was clear that people in Little Rock are confused about who's really in charge of the administration of the city of Little Rock. They want an accountable person, one person in the city of Little Rock that they can go to with regard to the administration of the city of Little Rock. And we felt, based upon everything that we heard, that this, let's say, formal recognition of the mayor's authority to hire and terminate the city manager would dissipate that confusion that may exist from the people in Little Rock. Do they go to the city manager to request certain things, or do they go to the mayor for certain things? And we felt like with this particular recommendation, were it to be adopted, then the people would know they should go to the mayor. Now, the mayor may delegate that responsibility to whomever, the city manager, to whomever else he or she decides to delegate it to. But the bottom line is, it does give the people one person that they can look to from an accountability standpoint. So that was the real purpose of this particular change. With regard to the city attorney, there's no change with regard to the hiring of the city attorney. It still requires a majority of the members of the board. And with regard to the annual review of the city attorney, that responsibility is going to be shared by the city board and the mayor. The reason for that is the 2007 ordinance does not say that the city attorney shall, I can't remember that phrase, I used it earlier, but is not necessarily serving at the direction of the mayor. The city attorney represents the entire city of Little Rock, represents both the city, the mayor, and the city board. You work with the city attorney all the time. The mayor works with the city attorney all the time. So you should have some input with regard to the hiring of the city attorney and with regard to the annual review. The vice mayor in this instance and the mayor would hold the annual review for the city attorney. The change we're proposing for the city attorney is that while the board may hire the city attorney, while the mayor may hire, subject to the approval of a majority of the board, the mayor may terminate, and his or her decision is final with regard to the city attorney, unless this board by 2/3 vote overrides that decision. So that's the big change with regard to the city attorney. That really outlines that particular, those particular positions. Are there questions about that before we move to the regional?
No, I have no questions.
Mr. Campbell, I have a couple of directors that have questions.
Yes, ma'am.
If you're ready to take a question.
ma'am.
Director Hendricks?
No, the mayor, I was to come back and somehow enough hearing him to come up.
Okay. Okay. All right. Director Hines? Oh, sorry. I got to turn you on.
Turn me on.
Okay.
Rick,
You're
thanks
on.
for that dissertation on the whole city manager. As I read the ordinance on being able to hire and fire city manager and city attorney, and based on what you just said, that the citizens of Little Rock found it confusing. If we were a mayor or council form of government, would those powers not already exist within mayor council versus us being a board of directors accountable and the board of directors being made up of the board of directors and the mayor accountable to the voters
Well,
versus a mayor council who have all those powers.
right. I mean, there's a distinction between those two, and your question is just full of opportunities for discussion. But if I understand you appropriately, with the city, the mayor council form of government, the city attorney is elected. The secretary, I believe, or I can't remember the position now. It's been a while since I've looked at that. But there's another elected position, as well as the mayor and the members of the districts or wards or whatever in those, or the council members. That's distinct from what we have now with the city manager form of government. It's true that under our hybrid city manager form of government we have in Little Rock, we look in many respects like a mayor-council form of government. We're moving toward that. I mean, not saying that there are going to be changes, but it's clear if some people could say, well, a lot of the things incorporated in the 2007 ordinance, as well as the votes of the city, kind of make us look a little bit more like a mayor-council form of government than a city manager form of government.
But we are a city manager.
You are a city manager form of government. Correct. And to my knowledge, you'll always be a city manager form of government. We were not trying to make that type of change. That was something we looked at, but we felt like we could make some proposals that would be consistent with the 2007 ordinance that would recognize the mayor's authority in a more efficient manner than is being exercised today.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions about the city manager, city attorney?
Director Richardson?
Yes, thank you
and
for
then,
your presentation.
Director Hendricks afterwards.
Two quick questions. Since the impetus for this whole planning process was a discussion around at-large positions, I think it emanated from Director Hendricks' request to put it on the general ballot in the election in 2018. This may be, Tom, you may want to chime in on this, because I don't know if you know this. But if we had a mayor-council form of government, would there be any legal prohibitions for having at-large seats, or would that be a hybrid? How would we address that issue? This is why we're here. So if we went to a mayor-council form of government, would that limit the number or limit the even possibility of us having at-large directors?
The state statute sets forth how aldermen are elected in the mayor-council form of government. It also sets a number. North Little Rock has, I think, 2 from each one of 5 different districts. And they have a provision that you have to be voted on by people that live within that district, and the person that serves has to live within that district.
So they don't have any geographical outlines or geographical?
The 5 districts are essentially like our wards.
Okay, I wanted to know if there was any limitations with respect to the ability or inability to have at-large directors if we change the form of government, which we haven't done yet.
And we're not proposing to do
Oh, no,
that.
no, no, I heard that. I heard that. And hopefully when we get through more of your report, we have some more questions, because I know I do.
Yes, Gary.
If I might,
This is Gary Smith.
We were attempting to eliminate ambiguity as to responsibility, be fair and be balanced, meaning boards involved, and so there's some balance. What we did not like about the current law of the mayor council, if you go under that law currently, is you elect the city attorney, the city clerk, and the city treasurer. Every board member would win by a majority in their ward. And so there were some things in the mayor council, under the mayor council law, unless that law is changed statewide and we went under that law, we would be electing 3 extra positions. We would have wards. You'd win by a majority in that ward. And then the mayor would still most likely, just like in North Little Rock, appoint a chief administrative officer, a chief of staff, or whatever you want to call Danny Bradley so you can call the person city manager, you can call him city administrator, chief administrative officer, you can call him whatever you want to. We're just operating under one particular law. So there's limitations with the mayor council law, and there are limitations with the city manager law and the city administrator law. And so we were trying our best to eliminate ambiguity, have fairness, have balance, and get where we want to go. And as it related to the at-large, the balance that we ultimately went to, and we were unaware that state law would have to be changed or the voters would have to vote on it, is that instead of at-large, we would go to having 3 regional directors that would be, you can call them super wards, whatever you want to call them, but we would have them with a defined area. And so if you had a city of 200,000 people, you know, you'd roughly have 3 areas of 66,000 in each area. Currently, each of you represent about 28,000 people. So again, it would sort of provide a balance across the city. So that's some of the background.
That's well stated, Gary. I appreciate your saying that. I don't want to emphasize too much about this mayor council thing, though, because we looked at all that, but we were staying away from that. We were going to focus on the best form of government for the city of Little Rock. We have a city manager form of government. We were not going to make that change to recommend a mayor council form of government. And so working within the confines of the city manager laws as existed at the time we did our work, we felt that this change was appropriate.
Director Hendricks?
The gentleman that was just at, could he come back up?
Yes, ma'am.
I don't recall your name,
I'm Gary Smith.
and you were one of the individuals. Have you ever run for office?
When I was 19, I was a justice of the peace, and I ran for the school board when I was 18.
Okay.
Yes, in North Little Rock.
Okay. And the reason why I attended all of the meetings except one, and I am really touched when they talked about the 40%. I know that usually I set fire to people, okay? So I did defeat 8 gentlemen.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's the thing that came to my mind. Why did you all pick the 40%?
Well, let me address that because you brought that up before,
Gary,
and I want.
let me just clarify. We've abandoned that. We're not, the 40%'s off the table now. Just consider that, Director, that's off the
Good,
table.
but that's,
But
you don't have to
but I
answer.
want to clarify.
Mr. Smith,
that
you don't, no need to clarify.
Maybe other than your daughter, every person was
Mr.
for
Smith.
the 40%, no matter their color.
Let him talk.
I want to clarify that.
But it's off the table, so
Okay.
it's no need to discuss it.
I wish you had told me. Oh,
Yes, ma'am, it's off the table.
didn't make sense.
I'm sorry. Okay.
Mr. Campbell, you can carry on.
So the next topic, beside the city manager, city attorney roles, is the regional directors. And this particular issue of at-large versus ward directors took up a considerable amount of our time. We spent more time talking about this subject than any other during our 8 months together. we think there's a lot of value in the system that we currently have with wards and at-large positions. But when we listened to our experts, when we went out to the public forums and listened to the people, we became aware of and have outlined in our report, which you can find, again, probably on, I think the best part is probably on page 15 of that report. You can see that we could hear that wards were favored by a number of the commentators at our meeting because the citizens felt that ward directors were more in touch with the local issue in their particular area. And so when they had a problem, they would call, first person they would call would be their ward representative. They also would call at-large members of the board, but they felt that the ward person was more responsive to their local neighborhood. I will say that, again, we separated out, and you've got to separate out the people who currently hold the at-large positions and the people who currently hold the ward positions from our discussion. We did. We didn't talk about who held what position and what all that was about. We were just saying in general for the city of Little Rock. And it seemed to us that there were virtues in the at-large positions. There were virtues in the ward positions. We did not want to go all at-large. We did not want to go all wards. And so the best position for us was to have a compromise. And the compromise was a consideration of regional positions. The reduction of the size of the board was really a step that we were taking, thinking that makes regional directors easy, because if we reduce the size of the board to 8, then we can just have 2 regional directors, and that's easy to do. But keeping the size of the board that we have right now, well, the only way we could have regional directors would be to have like 3 regions in the city of Little Rock. And an easy way to accomplish that would be just to have the current at-large positions at some point in time in the future redesignated, repositioned, repurposed as regional positions. And these regional positions would have, let's say, overlapping wards. And I don't know what that map is going to look like. This map, that I'm discussing, the regional maps, would have, that's in the future. That's something that will be drawn. You will decide how that's drawn, where that's drawn, but typically, say, MetroPlan or somebody like that would draw those regions. But these would be regions that would be equally populated. They would have equal, diversity. They would have all these considerations that would go into the Voters' Rights Act, like the mayor was just talking about, that Tom was sensitive to. All these things would go into the drawing of these regional districts, so that no one, district is an anomaly from the other 2. And the idea being that the citizens of Little Rock would get both the benefit of having a ward representative, as well as a regional representative that they could contact with regard to city business. So it's a compromise position. It's one that we felt had the benefit of both what we have today and could bring the, say, at-large positions down one level to closer to the people living in the wards. That's the whole purpose. It was a simple way to preserve the benefits of both the at-large and the ward system.
Director Hendricks.
Okay. Did I understand you to say that we would be electing a secretary?
No. I said secretary a moment ago when I was talking about the mayor-council form of government. Okay. That's really a clerk, and that's not on the agenda. That's not a part of this. I just misstated the title of that position. It's a clerk position under a mayor-council form of government. We don't have a mayor-council form of government, and so that's really not.
And my other concern is that I attended every one of those meetings except one, Southwest.
Yes, ma'am.
The turnout was poor. If anybody think it was great to represent this city, it was poor. I thought that and I hear the mayor say real poor. So, you know, where do we go on?
Well, I mean,
Who do we believe? You know, I saw that there were no persons there in large numbers. Very few people asked questions. Everybody asked like they were afraid to speak up. Very few people spoke up. Maybe one or two.
right. And you know,
And I can say that, and that was my reason for going, because really the committee, you know, was great. Even though my daughter was on it, I thought it was a waste of time.
well,
Very much
we
waste
did
of
our
time.
very
You may
best.
not hear that from these other people up here, but I've lived long enough to say what I feel
Right.
and to say it godly and pray about it, and nothing is greater than prayer.
And I'm
Thank
not
you.
objecting to that. I agree with that. So I'm suggesting to you that we did our very best work. We advertised these meetings. We held them all over the city. We met in different areas all over the city. We got as many citizens there as we could. We had, I thought, great substantive discussion during those meetings, and you were there, and I acknowledged you at each of those meetings. So we got input from not only the citizens, but then again, we had a number of experts whose names are in this report, including like Dr. Jay Barth. And Dr. Barth has written a paper and a couple of studies, but one which is attached as an exhibit to our report, where he says ward elections, frankly, are, aid in greater participation, both gender and racial, in elections. And so, but then we could not dismiss the other experts that we have that said there's value in at-large positions. And so we did not want to throw out one in favor of the other. We just compromised with these regional positions.
Director Adcock?
Yes. Going back to the regional versus the at-large. So was you intending for in the regionals for those directors to only be participating in things in that region?
No, ma'am, if I understand your question, it's my personal belief that every director is interested in the best interests of the city of Little Rock and is participating today in all decisions involving the city of Little Rock. So simply because you would live in a region under this proposal does not mean that you would only work and be concerned about areas in your region. What we've done with this particular proposal is to say you must be a resident of that region in order to run from that region, and the electors who would elect you would be from that region. So it's a smaller piece of the pie, if you want to say, Director Adcock, in terms of who the electorate is, but certainly that regional director would have an interest in everything going on in the city of Little Rock.
Mm-hmm. Elections cost the city lots of money.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm not talking about individual elections, but the elections to do this, $150,000. But I'm sitting here, and the only thing I can see that this would change then from your comments would be the fact that it would be elected from a smaller group of people. So what would be the advantage of that for a regional director?
Well, the regional director would only have to campaign in that region versus the entire city of Little Rock. The regional director would conceivably have to spend less money than would be required to campaign over the entire city of Little Rock. And the electors would actually be able to have greater contact with their regional director than they may have today with an at-large director. All that is just...
Why do you think that would be true?
That's just what was stated, and that's what we talked about among ourselves. I'm not saying it would necessarily be true. I mean, you and the other regional and the other at-large directors here, we were not focused on what you do today. We were not thinking about you or the other at-large directors. What we were thinking about people in the future, and we were surmising that this might bring the people living in different areas of the city, different regions of the city, in closer contact with the city board than exists today. And whether that's true or not, I don't know. But that's just...
We're asking people to spend $150,000 when we're not for sure if something's going to be true.
Director Adcock, if I understand your question about the $150,000, That's what it is to call the election. What's before you today is a regional districts that would not, if this board passes this ordinance, the direction from the board would then be to put it on a ballot November of 2020. So there's not any extra cost in this election cycle because we already are spending the $150,000 for the board seats that are up now, as well as in any other election that's going on November 2020. So it's not extra money. Just want to make sure that's clear.
Okay. Director Hendricks talked about the low turnout. Did you all count how many individuals, not the times they went, because Director Hendricks and I went to several.
Right.
So did you count us each time, or did you count individual people who attended those? And did you all count how many there were?
We tried to make an informal count. We did not numerically, count people that were there. And I agree with Director Hendricks. We did not get the turnout that we wanted. I mean, I would have loved to have had 200 people or more at every meeting. That's just not the way it turned out. So I can't give you a total number, but it was a smaller group than we would hope. But we felt that the questions that we received, the discussion that occurred, I mean, it was a pretty good discussion there, and certainly more audiences were, active than other audiences. But I enjoyed the process, and I think that those people that attended enjoyed the process, and there was a lot of give and take in those meetings.
Director Richardson?
Carpenter, I'm not finished.
Oh, I thought you. I'm sorry. I apologize.
Mr. Carpenter has told us time and time again that we cannot vote on things that them people in the future has to do, boards in the future have to do. What we've got on this ballot will not take effect until 2025. Is that correct?
It would take effect, actually it's 2024, as I understand it. In 2024, if it were to pass in the 2020 election that the mayor referred to, people would, rather than individuals running for at-large positions, those positions would be repurposed to regional positions, and individuals elected to those regional positions would assume office on January 1, 2025.
So it doesn't pertain to this election that we've got upcoming now?
Only to the extent that if the board adopts this ordinance, then it's placed on the ballot, and the people then would decide whether they want to see this change at the election in 2024.
In 2024, but not in this election?
Yes, ma'am, that's right. In this election, the positions 8, 9, and 10 are at-large positions. Positions 8, 9, and 10 will be voted upon in 2020.
And your recommendation now is to keep 7 wards?
Yes, ma'am.
Instead of going back to the 6?
Yes, ma'am. And that the 6-2 again was kind of an avenue. It was an easy avenue to get us to these, to say, regional directors where you would just have two regionals. It's easier to divide the pie in half. Director Peck has a great story about a pie cutter, but somehow it's easier to cut a pie in half than it is to do it in 3 pieces. But we still, we recommended that we just keep.
You would know that.
Yes, ma'am, she would.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Director Richardson?
Thank you, Mayor. Let me echo Director Hendricks' point. I wouldn't say it was a waste of time, but I think that it was something certainly a lot of us didn't think we were going to garner the kind of participation that we justified moving forward that process. I think the people who served, they did a wonderful, wonderful job. But to even have this group put together, we weren't playing chess. We weren't thinking about 3 or 4 other moves down the line, what's going to be best for this city. We were playing checkers. We responded to a proposed ordinance from one of our city directors, which makes it interesting to me how we're moving forward, because I still hadn't figured out what's the difference between a regional super director and a regular director beyond bigger geographical boundaries.
Well, if I understand your question if I understand correctly, Director Richardson, the difference is, one, the wards stay the same. So that nothing's changing there. So we're just talking about the at-large positions. So rather than the at-large position being the entire city of Little Rock, now the at-large position is going to be a regional position. And Gary Smith used the word super region, it's just a larger, if you want to say, it's a larger ward, if that helps it. It's just a larger area than exists today with wards, but it's smaller than the entire city of Little Rock.
So you can just say they're super wards and they do overlap with boundaries of,
Yes, sir.
of wards?
Yes, sir.
So to me, it's almost similar with the exception of just kind of limiting the boundaries. It's almost similar to what we have right now. Say I have an at-large director who will aggressively work against me, trying to turn my constituents and me in my ward, and that director is an at-large director. And you can have opportunities for conflict within your ward when you have a particular colleague that may not appreciate your work or may not appreciate the fact that you hadn't done what he or she wanted you to do.
I don't know anything about that. So I couldn't.
But the possibility could be there, though. If you don't have two people, you have a super director and a regular ward director. If those two don't get along, nothing's going to happen in that ward or that region.
I don't know anything about, again, you all know that better than anybody in the city of Little Rock. I mean, the fact of the matter is, as a citizen, we know that you're operating in the best interest of the city of Little Rock. We trust that you're getting together and when you meet and informally and informally that you're making great decisions on our behalf. And we elect you for that purpose. So I'm going to assume the best, and I'm going to assume that each ward representative is working in agreement with the at-large directors and the mayor for the best interest of the city of Little Rock.
It's one more simple question, Mayor, and I'm through. Since the impetus was a recommendation to put this on the ballot, was the elimination of at-large directors, period, was that part of any kind of conversation during this planning process? Did you factor that into the equation of what we're going to talk about, what recommendations we're going to move forward? Was that even discussed at all?
Sir, we talked about that. We talked about whether we would have all wards versus all at-large, and decided that neither of those alternatives were good, that there's benefit in having both a ward system and the system that might be a little bit larger with these super wards, if you want to say, with these regional districts. And so we felt like we could retain the best of what we've got right now, and could do so in a way that would promote the best interests of the city of Little Rock on a going forward basis.
Director Hendricks.
Thank you. The thing that I wanted to know, I would like to ask Tom a question, the attorney. Is that okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Could you tell me the at-large positions, if we could be put on the ballot by petitions for 220, regardless of this item that we have?
Director Adcock, Director Hendricks.
Anything that could prevent us from going with that?
A petition to go on the ballot is pretty much always accepted if the ordinance is passed by the board to call this election. Then I think that the petitions would not be available because there's a provision in the City Manager Enabling Act to prevent competing.
No, I'm not asking that anybody make them available. I'm going to get out there with the crew from Ward 1 and citywide and put this on the ballot with the correct number of petition signatures.
Right, but what I'm saying is that there's a section in the City Manager Enabling Act that if something is put on the ballot, that's going to block something else from being put on the ballot at the same time. If you defeat this and the people get out and do a petition, then yes, that would be a possibility.
Well, that's what we intend to do.
Director Wright.
I think.
Oh, Director, please. I actually didn't. Could you press again? I'm sorry. There you go.
Thank you, Mayor Scott. This is confusing. And I've listened to this, I've read this, and all to me, this is just going to make and cause confusion. If you had come back with a recommendation, well, let's just make everybody a ward director
Right.
and make the ward smaller. That would have made a whole lot more sense to me, because 28,000 people is a lot. So this, to me, you're just going to confuse people. And I attended the Ward 6 meeting, and there weren't even 10 people in that room. And the gentleman that got up and did most of the talking wasn't even talking about this. Okay? I didn't hear any discussion about this from the few people that were there. And I have not been approached by any of my constituents that this is an issue for them. So, to me, this is just adding confusion, and I just don't see it. I've listened to you, and the more you explain it, the more I'm like, okay, well, if people don't understand what we got, I just don't see how they're gonna understand this. And I agree with a couple of my colleagues here. You can just bring in more confusion than you're trying to solve. So this is all I'm saying right now is this is confusing. Thank you.
Director Campiris.
Couple quick questions for you. And again, and Irma likes to blame me for this, so I'll take the full blame or credit for it. But of the sessions that you held, was there a fairly universal questioning of positions or presenting of positions of different people?
I would say that with regard to this wards versus at-large issue, I would say when the subject came up that people saw value in both positions.
But this was a recurring theme.
Yes, it was.
You know, we always wish you had more people, but when the mayor takes out the budget to the community, there's what, 10 people in each time, Frank? 10 or 15 people?
Yes.
And the purpose of this is that you take and frame the question, whether there's 1,000 people there or 10 people there. And the beauty of a process like this is that you have 8 or 10 or 12 or 15 people who then take the time to really consider alternatives. And so the real issue is not, to me, whether there was 10 people in the room or there are 100 people in the room, but that the questions were posed to y'all and that you took the time to deliberate different considerations and different options for our city. So this is the third time I've seen this occur. And each time I'm always surprised and pleased that people independently think about what's best for the city, not what's best for Dean Campiris or Irma Hendricks, but for the city. So that to me is the reason that I think this is a success. Now, whether we vote for it or not, or the citizens vote for it or not, that's a whole different issue. But what you've done is examined where we are, offered opinions on how we can improve that situation, and then it's up to the citizens to say, we want to do it. So I thank you. So I think that this self-flagellation of there weren't that many people there, the issue is y'all taking the time to give us different ways of looking at this situation. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Campiris. Director Peck.
Hello, thank you. Well, thank you, Dean. You said everything I was going to say, but much more eloquently. But I wanted to thank all of you all that served, and it's not your fault that people didn't show up. And Rick, I hope we're still friends after I asked you to do this for Ward 4, and you did it so very admirably. And are you still my friend?
Yes, I'm still your friend.
Good. But I commend each and every one of you because I know that you all had different opinions. You spent 8 months of your life. What a labor of love, and it's because you all love Little Rock like all of us do. And it's not your fault. Don't blame yourself. No self-flagellation or anything like that. And you've come to a consensus, and you've done a vast amount of research. Now, what happens from here on out, I don't know, but thank you all for serving.
Thank you. Thank you.
Director Hendricks.
Thank you. My last comment. The reason why I have been vocal about what's going on, I have sat on this board for 12 years. I sat on this board 93 and 94, and my constituents and I complain about the racial makeup of this board. This city is majority minority, yet we have 3 persons that sit on the at-large can control whatever happens on this board, and I resent that, and I've proven that by my actions. So I can tell you now I'm not voting for this.
Well, Director Hendricks, I don't know any of the background of what you were just talking about, but the logic of what you were saying, I mean, I understand. And so, in many respects, a regional district will probably result in a greater likelihood of...
I don't think so. You don't have to explain that to me. It would not.
Okay.
It's called like regional. What are we talking about? Same thing, just a different color.
The geographic area would be smaller than the whole city at large.
Yeah, but it's still got power over the other members of this. But you haven't sat up here. You would really have to sit up here to know what I'm talking about. It's like Director Richardson mentioned that I had put before this board an ordinance where we would get rid of the at-large positions. What was wrong with that? But they voted against it. No, I'm not asking you. They know who I'm talking about.
Hey, we're going to, Director Richardson.
Thank you. That's the end
Yes,
of
ma'am.
it.
Director Richardson.
Yes,
And then
sir.
I'm going to give some final
Okay.
comments.
Once again, I want to thank you guys for serving and giving us your time and your expertise and lending us your voice. Here's what's problematic for me. Now, the rationale for doing this was to get more citizen participation based on a recommendation of an ordinance to put this on the ballot. So the rationale for doing that, and the reason why it passed was we need to do this to get more citizen participation. And we didn't get that. And now we're saying that wasn't a success. That's the kind of cognitive dissonance I'm having with this whole process, because that was done. You guys were a result of an alternative to a ballot issue that one of my colleagues was going to put on. And then we said, that's why we need to do this to get more participation, and we didn't get participation. We're not blaming you guys for that. But the impetus for that was to get more citizen participation. And we didn't get that, and then we said, well, don't worry about it. When we decided that that's what we need to do. That's kind of, like Director Wright, it's kind of confusing. It's cognitive dissonance, man, because we did that, and if we Mayor, let's move on. I'm through.
So my final comments, and then we'll move on, because we do have a policy meeting immediately following this agenda meeting. So, Mr. Campbell, thank you so much, you and all the members of the former government study group, for the 8 months that you spent. So I want to just share a few things, and then we'll move forward. First and foremost, I'm a big person on background, history, and context. We have to understand, how did we get to this place? This board, minus me, on December 3rd, voted to have a former government study group to look at our form of government. One, as we understand, was because there was petitions going out to change it from a perspective, and this board wanted to get greater understanding. Two, there was a mayoral election going on where all 5 members, all members that were candidates publicly stated, except for one, that wanted to change from repurposing at-large city directors to ward directors. All but one wanted to make that change. Then on December 3rd, before the runoff election, this board voted for a former government study group for a year. When we then got into office, we worked with this board to change it from a year to 6 months. This former government study group said 6 months isn't enough. We're running up on the timetable, and we appreciate you all trying to make that timetable, but you wanted to ensure that there was community participation. And because of that community participation, we went on to 8 months. I think we all can attest, whether it's a neighborhood meeting or a public meeting, we never know how many people are going to show up. It can be 10, it could be 200. We never know. It's our duty and our effort to outreach to the community. We can't make community members attend meetings, but it's our And that's the reason why we do more than just have the community meetings. We try our best to, when possible, have live streaming, things of that nature. A group of volunteers that this board appointed provided these recommendations. The next step is for this board to decide, do they want to listen to the folks that they appointed? You'll make a vote. And the vote will be yes or no to take regional districts to the people. The vote will be yes or no to increase the mayoral authority and that's another vote. Here's the thing. This board asked for this. Now we have to respond by our votes. What I can share with you, because I was one of the five that campaigned on moving away from at-large city directors, has nothing to do with the personalities. I care deeply for the at-large city directors who sit on this board, but it's more than just a person. Has nothing to do with personalities, have nothing to do, because every member of this board loves our city. They're great servant leaders and would do whatever possible to see the city grow and be prosperous. I just want to be clear because we're going back and forth. If the recommendations fail, the next alternative, at least for this administration, is to consider what we campaigned on. I gave campaign promises. One thing I learned a long time ago, you keep your promises or die trying. So there will be a next step if certain things are failed, plain and simple. For those who are confused about regional districts, you can see examples of it in the cities of Houston, I believe Chattanooga and Memphis, where they have super ward districts. It's just and I can understand that it could be just a smaller version of the at-large. I totally understand that. But I totally understand that. And so again, we are responding to the people that we appointed, and we move forward. Thank you so much, everyone. We will have a public hearing on items 13 and 14. Items 13 and 14. Any questions for items 13 and 14? Seeing none. This agenda meeting is now, Director Hendricks, I'm sorry. Yes, ma'am.
Attorney Carpenter. Oh, excuse me. Tom, would you respond to me again? Beginning as of this day, I look forward to moving toward getting signatures to be on the ballot in 2020 November.
It'll be 10,167 people. Okay. You have to get that number because it's based on the November 6, 2018 election, which 67,783 voted.
So I will.
That's the number you need.
Okay, my constituents will pursue this.
Yes, ma'am. Director, do you have another question, Director Hendricks? Oh, take that off. Director Richardson, did you have a question?
No, I don't think you ever turned my light off.
Okay, thank you. Seeing no other questions for items 13 and 14, this agenda meeting is now adjourned. We'll now move forward into our policy discussion. And part of the policy discussion, we will have our Chief of Staff, Mr. Charles Blake, to discuss the census update.
Good afternoon. I'm waiting for the PowerPoint to put up. Kathy, you okay? Okay. It should be, yeah.
Does LRTV have the PowerPoint?
Lamar, you have the PowerPoint? The PowerPoint? Send it to the PowerPoint.
I sent it to you and Allie.
We'll go ahead and set up.
Right, there we go.
Thank you, Kathy. Thank you, Kathy. Good afternoon, Mayor and Board. Census 2020 is upon us. As the mayor has stated over and over, that the census will be the priority for our city for 2020. We have been working since June of last year. We've hosted 2 tours with the U.S. Census Bureau and in our hard to count areas. We had a training in October at the University of at Central Park, and today we are going to present to you the importance of the census process, as well as our outreach efforts of the city of Little Rock. Next slide, Kathy. So the Constitution requires a count of the population every 10 years. The United States Census is mandated by Article 1, Section 2 of the United States Census of the United States Constitution, which states that representatives and direct taxes shall be apportioned among the several states according to their respective numbers. The actual enumeration shall be made within 3 years after the first meeting of the Congress of the United States and within every subsequent term of 10 years. So the census determines the number of seats each state has in the House of Representatives for the next decade, and electoral college votes each state receives. It also draws the congressional and state legislative districts, school districts, and voting precincts. It helps to enforce voting rights and the civil rights legislation. It helps to distribute federal dollars to states. It informs federal, tribal, state, and local government on planning decisions, and it provides population benchmark for nearly every United States survey. So what's the importance to Arkansas? In 2020, Arkansas stands to receive approximately $6 to $7 billion from the census. Each Arkansan not counted is a loss of at minimum $2,542 per person per year for 10 years. A 1% undercount of our Arkansans in 2020 is a loss of $750 million over a 10-year period. That equals 30,000 people at $2,500 per person over the next 10 years. In 2000, estimated loss in funding on just 8 federal programs was over $17 million. So for Little Rock, the stakes are extremely high. The allocation of tens of millions of dollars per year in federal funding for neighborhood improvements, public health, education, social services, transportation, and more will flow from the census count. So historically, the census has relied on mail paper questionnaires and temporary field staff going door to door. The 2020 census will be the first to offer an online response option. So the 2020 census is different from any other census we've ever been through. This is the first time that you will have an online response option. About 99.6% of addresses will receive an invitation letter with instructions on how to respond online or by telephone using a unique ID. So on the online responses, all households will have the opportunity to complete the 2020 census online, identifying themselves through either a unique ID, including the mail, or through household addresses. Online questionnaires will be offered in English plus 12 other languages, including Arabic, Chinese, French, Haitian Creole, Japanese, and many more. Phone responses. The first U.S. census in which people will respond to the census by phone with their unique ID or household address. Telephone assistance and responses will be available in the same languages. The paper questionnaires will be available only in English and bilingual English and Spanish. After 3 mail requests to complete the census online or by phone, unresponsive households will receive a paper questionnaire and return instructions in the 4th mailing. So self-response operations ends on April 30. So what we have is a campaign to alert all our residents and citizens that it's a 3-part campaign. You have to open the census letter. We don't know what that looks like. We don't know what the envelope looks like. We haven't got it from the U.S. Census Bureau yet. But as soon as we get it, we're going to post it online. We're going to post it on social media. But the first thing is to open the census letter. The second part is to save your ID number on your letter. And the third part is to respond. So if we're going to look, this is a sample of the census letter. And if you look in the middle in those boxes, it will have, you can respond by April 1st, and it will have the website. And then that second box, the second box is the important number. That's your number that you have to have. So we do have a sample of the letter. It's Director Hendricks, I agree. They're making it difficult for us. We don't know what the letter looks like to open, but we do know that this is this is a sample of the letter. You will have to keep your census ID number. The questionnaire will be 10 questions. You have to fill out a page per person that lives in your residence. That's a person. So we're talking about, even if it's a baby, 1 page per person, every person in your residence. The 2020 census form will include just a handful of questions that are asked about every person in the household. Name, the relationship to the head of the household, sex, age, date of birth, Hispanic origin, race. The individual filling out the form is also asked a few additional questions, such as whether the home is owned or rented, how many people are staying in the house or apartment on April 1st, 2020. That's the date. How many people are living in each house, each apartment, each home, April 1st, 2020. Does this person usually stay or live elsewhere? So those are the type of questions, 10 questions, approximately 10 to 15 minutes per page. So what we're looking at now is the census date overview. What you have is that first date, March 12th. The website will go live, self-reporting via phone, online, and mail begin. So we're expecting the first letters to drop in mailboxes by March the 12th. March 30th through April 1st, the count for our homeless populations in residents and shelters, soup kitchens, other locations will be from March 30th through April 1st. April 1st is National Census Day, and that's the federal day, that's the national day, that's April 1st will be National Census Day. On April 9th through May 4th, they will go and count RV parks, mobile homes, hotels. So that's highly mobile living. So that will happen from April 9th through May 4th. On May 13th, the Census Bureau begins in-person efforts. So enumerators will visit unresponsive households up to 6 times. If 3 in-person attempts to count a household are unsuccessful, enumerators will attempt to conduct interview with a proxy. So our goal is before May 13th is to have as many people respond. Again, to open that letter, keep that ID, and respond online or through telephone or with the paper questionnaire. So that is our goal, is to have few U.S. Census people knocking on our doors. So the census website will shut down July 31st. The census operations will continue, but the website will shut down on July 31st. And I'm going to let Marcellus come up and talk about our hard to count populations.
Thank you, Charles. So when we look at where we need to allocate our resources, we're looking specifically at the hard to count populations that have been identified by the census. That includes young children. Children 0 to 5 are the most undercounted in the census. And when you look at Latino and African American children, they're twice the rate of white children. So we're focusing heavily on the message of be counted, everyone. And that is a problem because the most undercounted children came from people that filled out the census form in 2010, in part because when you read the form it says each person, and when you look at the form itself, if you think person, you don't automatically assume I'm talking about my infant child. So that's why they're not included, and that is a message that we're focusing directly on about children. Persons of color, non-English speakers, immigrants, many of these categories overlap. Persons of color in Arkansas, more than 6% of the county identifies as Hispanic regardless of race. 38% reports their race as either black or black and another race. And so those people also fall into low-income persons and have less access to internet or being able to respond the way the census is asking us to. When we look at non-English speakers, there's an estimated 2,900 households that are non-English speaking. And so if they're waiting for the form to come, the problem is that the form is only in English and Spanish. And we have to remember that in Little Rock, we did a report in 2018, New Americans in Little Rock, and we identified, apart from Spanish speakers, which were 46% of the population, we also had a population of Chinese that was growing. We had a population of Koreans, Filipinos, and also Indians. And so this population also needs to be addressed, and the census will have online and by phone access in those languages, but they will not have it on the form. It's only available if you do it by paper in English and Spanish. So one access that we're making available is that we are going to have the community centers at Southwest and West Central available with staff and volunteers to be able to help people get to the census site and fill it out once they have their form. When we look at low-income persons, 20% of Pulaski County did not have access to internet at all. And so having the community centers available in those two areas in particular is important, because when we look at the hard-to-count areas in a minute, you'll see that many of those red areas are in Southwest, and we have growing populations in 72204, 72211. In terms of persons experience homelessness, because there's only 3 days that enumerators are going to count them, it's very important that the city identifies exactly the camps where they are, because what information is provided to the census by the city is where they will go. So we have to accurately identify all the shelters, all the camps, all the places, and make sure that's up-to-date information in each area. In terms of immigrants, 6% of the county's population was born outside of the United States. And it's really important to know that 25% of these people entered the U.S. within the last 10 years. So one of the messages that we have is that, what is the census? Because they're not aware of it. They've never done it before. They were not here when it happened last time. And also because this is a new process, we're targeting these messages so that we know that there's people who maybe were here before because they were here in the last 20 years, but this is a different process, and how is that going to work? And that's why we have that three-part: open the letter, keep the code, and go and fill out the census. We also have persons with physical or mental disabilities. These are a wider challenge because they face systemic inequities, and they typically fall into these other populations as well, in terms of many of them are homeless, or also persons of color or low income. In addition, persons who don't live in traditional housing. As Charles stated, between April 9th and May 4th, enumerators will visit these locations, these these RV parks, these marinas, recreational campgrounds, things of that nature, motels, hotels, to count these people. And that is the way they will be counted, because they don't have a residence. So we have to, again, make that message known to the owners of those locations that this is what's coming, so that people will participate. And finally, LGBTQIA persons. In 2018, sexual orientation and gender identity was removed from the census questionnaire from the Americans Community Survey, and it is not included in this questionnaire as well. And that resulted in a lower response rate among that population. They estimate the same will happen this time, so we're also working to outreach to those individuals to make sure that we can adequately ensure that everybody is counted equally. When we look at the hard to count areas, you can see the areas that are dark red are the areas that had the least response, okay? So if you look at 2002, which is sort of in the middle there, and 4107, 4108, that's the area all the way from Chico to Geyer Springs. Baseline Road is included in that, all the way down to Arch. that is most of Southwest. If we travel a little bit over to 4103, we're getting into the Mableville area. There's a lot of trailer parks out there. There's also a growing immigrant population in 72103. And that's why we see that area as being hard to count. In addition, if you go up a little bit into where you see at the top here on the left, 4216, that is going out into 72204 area, and that is where we have another growing population, primarily Indian immigrants that are growing out there. Because of the change in focus to largely this electronic method or by phone, we also create a new population of hard to count, which is anybody that doesn't have access or who doesn't know how to do these things. So that includes elderly people who may not be really functional with their computer. And in addition, the census form itself will not be mailed until April 8th. So that really gives us an onus to push for everyone to get it done before that form gets mailed out. And that's why the community centers will be open starting March 16th. As soon as letters are out, we want to make sure that people know and are aware we're here to help. And I'm going to turn it over to Lamar to talk about our marketing plan.
You'll have to excuse me, my voice is not great right now. So as Maricela mentioned, our Hispanic population is among the hard to count. So you'll notice here that our materials are being transcreated, not just translated from English to Spanish, because the translation isn't always perfect. So we have Little Rock Counts, which is also Little Rock Cuenta, and Censo instead of census. So our marketing campaign will rely heavily on, excuse me, on earned media, which is those things that we can get for free. So we'll start obviously with a media tour, Rachel and Rebecca. Media tour, so we can get on as many stations and news outlets as possible with our newsworthy content. We'll move on with a kickoff event, which will be in March at Southwest Community Center. Did we set the date? March 7th. From 2 to 5 p.m. at Southwest Community Center. That kickoff event obviously will be announced with a media advisory and a press release the day of. We're going to be scheduling as many interviews as possible to get our spokespeople and our content out there to reach the hard to count population and everyone in general as possible, because we need everyone to be counted, which is one of our messages. Everyone counts, which you see here. Everyone counts, which is translated to yes. Also, we'll be heavily relying upon social media because we don't have a huge budget. We could get a good bang for the buck on social media with our social media posts. Again, everything is being transcreated, so we already have our calendar in the works with posts scheduled to go out regularly. Another method we would use would be those owned media, which is those things that we control or our partners control. For example, Central Arkansas Water has already offered to do a bill insert for us. It would include both all three, Little Rock County and to the messages in English and Spanish in the bill insert for March. They've offered to pay for that. We would do decals and or bumper stickers on our housing and neighborhood program vehicles, and public service announcements on LRTV, KWCP, which is also owned by, it's a owned content station. And then we would do a radio buy. Here's where we would spend some money, would be in the radio and outdoor, because radio is a cost-effective method of reaching a large population of people, and we can do both of those in English and Spanish. Our English radio buy would be kind of on the slim side. We really want to spend a little bit of money just so they don't, when we ask for a PSA, they don't put us on at 3 o'clock in the morning when no one is listening. But for the most of the money for radio would be spent on our Hispanic radio stations, and then a significant little chunk on outdoor for the billboards in the targeted areas so we can reach those people. And Oh, yeah. And so then, obviously, I'll show you a few potential marketing items, T-shirts, for example, yard signs, everything, like I said, is easily transcreated and easily reusable. That's one of the things that I wanted to do, for example, with our Central Arkansas water insert. We would want to reuse that and put those with in the vehicles with some of our housing and neighborhood programs, our code enforcement officers, put them in our neighborhood resource centers, put them in our community centers, so we can get the more benefit from each piece.
So as I stated earlier, the mayor has made sure that this is a priority. This is the priority for 2020. So we have a very competent team of city employees that are working on this, including Marcella and Lamar, Jay Barth, Emily Cox, Stephanie Jackson, Michael Drake, and Melissa Bridges, as well as we have formed and launched a complete counts committee, which we had our first meeting February 3rd. Some of those people were here. I think some are still here. Pastor Glenn is here. So you have Pastor Dwight Townsend, Ronnie Detman, who had to leave, County Clerk Terry Hollingsworth, Pastor Cesar Ortega, Chancellor Margaret Evelby from Pulaski Tech, Mandy Davis from Jericho Way, Mariah Warren from First Security, Rachel Bourne from Our House, Candy Hughes from Southwest Power Pool, Reverend Maxine Allen, Tamiko Townley, who had to leave earlier. She's with the Hunger Relief Alliance. Reverend Glenn Hersey from St. Mark Chris from Central Arkansas Library System, and Pam Smith from Little Rock School District. So we have a good group of people that we're going to be charging them to help us spread our message, to get it out to their peers, to their neighbors, to their work groups. So that's our first part of our outreach plan, and we're going to need you guys too. We're going to need all citizens to play a role. It's going to be citizens plus a multiplier of 10. We need the mamas, we need the cousins, we need everybody to make sure that they are counted. So beyond the word of mouth outreach, we're going to have we believe in canvassing and door to door. So most of our dollars that are going to be spent on canvassing efforts, making sure that we are meeting people where they are, letting them know that the census is coming. This is what the 3 stages we need you to do. Keep that envelope, open that envelope, keep that number, and respond. We're also going to be depending on partnerships with our public-private charter schools and our institutions of higher education. So we're going to be having take-home materials of the census are going to be sent home to grade school parents. We're going to use the district's platforms as text messaging and phone calls, which I get 3-4 times a day, to contact parents. We're going to host census parent nights at each school to answer questions on the census. We're going to be targeting messaging to parents of children under 5. Those are our most hard to count, and we're going to be targeting messaging to those parents. We're going to, and the school district will provide free use of computer labs as well at some schools and locations. So we're going to be reaching out to our faith base, our leaders, to make sure we are crafting messages, figuring out how we can get the message about the census to their parishioners. We're going to be, as Marcella stated earlier, we have public access to Southwest and West Central starting March 16th to April 31st. They're going to be staffed with volunteers from the city and UALR. We're going to have Spanish and English assisters will be present to help people with the census, to fill it out on the computers there or on cell phones. So we're trying to make it as easy as possible. And we're going to be leveraging our city resources. We talked about that with the fleet vehicles. We're going to have a webpage. We're going to be going to our neighborhood resource specialists who are already on the ground level, including them, listening to them. They are used to throwing block parties. They are used to talking to their people. So we're going to use those resources, and we're going to be partnered with our public entities like Central Arkansas Water. So this is going to be the message going forward that Little Rock counts in 2020. That it's going to take all of us, and we all have to be counted. So if you want more information, you can go to littlerock.gov/2020 census, and please use hashtag LR counts, capital L, capital R counts. And I'll take any questions.
Director Hines.
Yes, sir.
On this poster to your left, y'all have got the Spanish language logo. It says Little Rock Cuenta instead of Little Rock Census. Look down at where it says 2020, Charles.
Right.
Yep. That's not, just, you might want to redo that one. That somebody, when they did it. That's it. That was just something I was catching as I was.
See, when you make stuff big, you see stuff.
Thank you for that feedback, Director Hines. Director Adcock.
Yes. How do we count the people in the jail? Are they all count as residents of Little Rock since it's in the city limits of Little Rock?
Wherever the jail is. So our jail will go to the city of Little Rock. The jail in Wrightsville will go to the city of Wrightsville. So wherever they are on April 1st, we have been having bi-weekly meetings with the county, so we can coordinate most of these efforts. But yeah, if at our jail, if our jail is on Roosevelt in the city of Little Rock, if they're in there on April 1st, 2020, they will be counted for the city of Little Rock.
How will they get their number?
They would have to have a count. They would have someone in the jail would have to have a count.
Okay. And juveniles that are incarcerated?
Same goes for them. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Director Hendricks.
Are the shirts ready?
Not yet, but they will be. I will
let me
bring
know.
one to your house.
Okay.
All right.
Director Wright.
I have a number of low to moderate income apartment complexes, and some of them have on-site management.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it would be prudent if we reached out that way, because 99% of these individuals have to go into
highly mobile.
They
You're
have to go
absolutely right.
into the office to pay their rent,
Mhm.
and we can ask them to assist us with this. And I know most of my managers, they kind of shift and turn, but they've been pretty cooperative whenever I've tried to get information.
I totally
to them.
agree. Yes, ma'am.
And then the second thing is, I believe that a lot of my complexes receive vouchers from the Metropolitan Housing Alliance.
Mhm.
I believe that if we tie some of this to that, when they, not tying it, but making sure that they're working with us as a partner, so that when people get their vouchers, they can ensure that these people are counted.
That's a great idea.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
And not only at the complexes, I have a lot of single-family residences that get the housing vouchers.
I'm glad you brought that up, because that's something that I should have said earlier. That's going to be a focus on ours is the apartment complexes.
Mhm.
Those
It
are
definitely
usually
needs to be.
the hardest to canvass. We're going to be working with the housing and planning, who have relationships with those managers, so we can knock on all of those doors. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Director Peck.
Thank you. Charles, do you have, or Lamar maybe, graphics that you can send to us so we can share on social media?
Yes, ma'am. We definitely do. Hashtag LR counts.
Seeing no other questions, thank you so much, Mr. Blake, and thank you the entire team that's working on our Little Rock Counts initiative. I think we all understand that this is a high priority for the city as we understand representation, and it's tied to our federal resources that we receive as a city. And we will go to every hard count area to ensure that we are all counted and represented here in the city of Little Rock, being the state's capital city. So thank you so much, and we do appreciate you.
Thank you.
Now we will transition to our solid waste update. Director John Honeywell.
Good evening, everyone. What we've been asked to do is give a presentation regarding changes that have been made to our solid waste services based on the ordinance that was passed back in 2019. So solid waste, what we're responsible for is the collection, transportation, disposal of most of the residential garbage that's created in the city, single-family residential homes. We also provide recycling services to those same customers through a contractor. And then we also do yard waste collection and processing, and we do bulky item collection. So in 2019, the city undertook a study to examine our solid waste rates and looking at all the services that we provide. Based on that study, we came up with a rate that we needed to sustain our operations for the next 10 years and stay solvent. That study included any landfill expansions that are required over the next 10 years, any capital investment in equipment, staffing needs, upgrades, increases in benefits to those employees. All of that was included in that rate study. So in September of last year, Ordinance 21780 was passed. And as part of those revisions, we increased our collection rate for solid waste to $28.90 a month per customer. We added an on-call bulky item change that went, you have one pickup per household that's included in that annual fee that you pay. So any additional pickups that are done at those residencies cost $25 for the first 2 cubic yards and $10 a yard in excess of 2 yards. And I'm going to have more detail about each of these a little later in the presentation. Then we also had oversized yard waste and uncontained solid waste that gets put out. That's at that same rate of $25 for 2 cubic yards, $10 at each additional yard. Then we also added something about habitually contaminated recycling, where if someone has decided that they would prefer to use their recycling bin as a trash can instead of using it for recycling, this gives us the ability to go out and remove that can. And then there's a fee that resident has to pay if they want to decide to get the recycling bin back and start recycling correctly. And I'll have more detail on that whole process later in the presentation as well. And then also as part of that code ordinance change, there was an increase in the additional garbage carts that you can get. Everyone gets one included. If they want an additional one now, it's $10 a month. Previously, it was $7 a month. We kept all those rate increases, percentages the same. That's why it went to $10. Recycling cart did not change. So next, our on-call program. This service was instituted to provide an option for customers that have items that are either too large or too heavy to otherwise fit in with their normal trash service. We're talking furniture, appliances, lawn furniture, mattresses, those type of large materials that do not fit in your trash can. It was not created to provide excess collection of excess trash beyond what is typically fitting in your garbage can. And we went on to say that, reiterate that it's $25 after that first included pickup. So, if someone wants to get an on-call collection, this has been the big question, I think, that's been going around the last few weeks, how are they notified about this new structure that we're using on on-call collections? If you call 311 or you go on the computer for online to request a 311 collection, you'll see these, either they'll be told to you over the phone or you'll see them on the web portal explaining the program, where you get one included, and then after that, there is this charge for each additional pickup that we do. If you do an on-call collection through the app, if you'll see there on the left-hand side, that's a screen capture of the actual app on a phone, and you can see where it's highlighted on there. It might be a little difficult to see. It also states that there's only one free pickup included annually for on-call. So we've tried to make people aware when they call to ask for this service that you have one collection included, and after that, you have to pay. So once someone puts something in the 311 system, our process is we now have tablets large iPads that each of our trucks has when they go out to do these collections. When they come up to an address that's in our system that they're going to collect that day, they pull up, they take a photo of what's out at the residence, doing our best to identify the address and any other information that we'll need to confirm that we actually picked up material at a location. Once we've picked it up, we actually take a photo to show that we did pick it up. All this gets attached to that service request in the 311 system. So if someone calls later to ask about what did you pick up, what didn't get picked up, we can actually pull up that request and look at the photos that have been turned in by our staff. Then, after we actually go out to a site that's in our 311 system for an on-call collection, and we pick something up, and that's important. If we go out and there's nothing at the location that's been turned in, which does happen, it's over at that point. We close it out. There was nothing out. It's not even counted as a collection. But if we do pick something up, every resident that we pick up something, we mail this postcard to, regardless if it's your first collection of the year or your 15th collection of the year. They get this postcard every time we collect something at that address. This is our attempt to let these residents know that we've been to your address and we've collected something that's going to be part of this on-call system, and that's potential for it to be charged if it's not your first pickup. Some background on on-call, just to give you a little history of where we've been over the last few years. This shows you the total collections that we've done since 2016. It was almost 30,000 in 16, 33,008 in 17, 41,000 in 18, and then last year we were at 45,319 on-call collections in the city. So then we went to look at who's actually using the service. We have, for a round number, 60,000 customers in the city that we service through our solid waste. That's residential trash collection, yard waste, and then they have the ability to do the on-call. 45,000 collections. Out of those 45,000 collections, 12,000 of them were at an address where they only got one collection, one pickup in the year. The remaining 32,000 collections last year were done at 10,481 addresses. So those 10,481 homes had multiple collections at them. So there's 17% of our customer base accounted for 32,600 of our collections. So on the next slide, it breaks down a little bit for you. Almost 39% of our customers used the service last year. That's one time or multiple times. That's in total. 61% didn't use on-call at all. 83% of our customers aren't impacted by this new $25 fee. So that's people that use it once or don't use it at all. That's 83% of everybody in the city. They are not impacted by this $25 fee. 17% of our customers will be impacted, that based on 2019 numbers. 17% of our customers will be impacted by this, but they accounted for 72% of all the pickups we did last year. We had residents from 2 pickups. Our highest number was 28 at one address for on-call. So you can sort of see why we wanted to approach this program a little differently as we're moving forward. Let me catch up here, excuse me. So that's all of our information on on-call, and I'm going to go through these next 2 things, then I'll take any questions that you'll have. Next is our recycling contamination, and a reminder of that's where if someone has a contaminated bin, we have the ability to go out and remove that bin, and then they have to pay a fee to get their bin back. So how our recycling works with contamination related, our contractor, Waste Management, is responsible for doing our collections. They are supposed to tag a cart if it's contaminated, and they provide us that list of carts that they've tagged. By tagging that cart, they're notifying that resident that you have contaminants in your cart. You need to remove those contaminants. We'll come back in the next cycle and dump your cart. That's what is supposed to happen. That doesn't always necessarily happen. The city wants to encourage our residents to recycle and recycle right. These are some examples of what we would consider a probably extremely contaminated recycle bin. And these are some examples of habitually contaminated recycle bins where this has been ongoing for some time. So this is the kind of thing that we're going to target. This is not somebody accidentally had a plastic bag that they threw in their recycle bin one time and they can take it out and get rid of it. We're wanting to target, or not target, but at least respond to those that are putting trash in their carts all the time and not changing their behavior over time. So what we're going to do in these situations where Waste Management has gone out and tagged a cart, we have a complaint about a cart that's left on the curb all the time that has trash in it. That's going to trigger us to go out and get involved. We're going to go out, first confirm, has Waste Management tagged that cart? Make sure they've gone through their process to give the resident the opportunity to correct their behavior. If that's happened, and there's been no change in the behavior, we're going to go out and tag it, and the tag that you see there, or the red notice you see on the right-hand side there, that is the tag that we're going to be using. It will be in English and Spanish. It's going to be a long roll of tape where we'll be able to pull it off. It'll be, English, Spanish, so we'll be able to pull it off, tape the lid closed. So you can't say you did not know that this was on your cart. We're going to put a date on there of you have from this date 1 week to correct this, and if you don't, the city may come and remove the recycle bin, and then to get it back, you have to pay that $50 fee. We have contact information on the bottom so they can contact us if they have questions. It's phone numbers, email. There's different ways that they can contact us to figure out what they need to do to correct this. If they don't get it corrected and we go back the next week, we're going to schedule the cart to be picked up. We'll take it and dump it, and then we'll keep the cart. And lastly, roll-off. The roll-off system was created really to help neighborhoods organize and provide cleanups for their areas. It was to encourage those entities to have their community members want to try to keep their areas cleaned up. We use 20 cubic yard roll-offs, which you can see in the photo there. That's an example of one. So if someone wants to get a roll-off, they can call 311 and put in a request. That request is sent to Solid Waste. Solid Waste is going to contact that person to ask them what they're wanting to do, schedule it, how many they want, location. There's a waiver release that they have to sign and return to us prior to us delivering the cart. That waiver outlines all the rules, regulations, materials, stuff that you can't put in, and responsibilities of having the dumpster out where we're going to place it. The dumpster will be left for 3 days, then we come back and pick it up. Right now, individuals are allowed 1 dumpster a year. Neighborhood associations are allowed 8 per year. So it's an encouragement to have that organized cleanup versus individually scheduled out carts that reduce our ability to provide those larger cleanup efforts. And on the last page, last year we did over 1,600 dumpster deliveries around the city. That was over 30 a week, I'm sorry. It's about between 5 and 6 a day. Only 2% of our customers used roll-off dumpsters last year. So that 1,600 is not individual carts. You have some neighborhoods that got more than one, but you also had some individuals that got more than one. So it's not a widely used benefit just because of the scale, and also not everybody needs a dumpster all the time. What we typically see before the end of the year, we have to cut off requests for dumpsters usually by the beginning of October, because at that point we have already scheduled out through the end of the year. There's that many requests. So what we do is we stop taking them at that point. That way we have the ability to still, at the beginning of the next year, go to those neighborhoods or other areas that need those to organize cleanups, and we have availability. If not, we would just schedule further and further out in the future. So that's why we try to limit it. When we get to a certain distance of scheduled out in front of us, we stop taking requests. And then the last little note I have up there, if you go to the private market to get a dumpster, it's anywhere between $450 and $600 to get one. And we do $1,600 a year, so you can sort of see the benefit that we're providing at this point. And that's the end of the presentation now, so I'll take any questions y'all have.
Vice Mayor Wyatt.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Honeywell,
Yes, ma'am.
the data that you're talking about, is it Is your data by address or by caller?
Say that
In
one more time.
regards to the 83% that were, will not be impacted, was your data that you gathered, was it by address or by caller?
It's by the address that we physically picked up the material. So if you called in someone else's address,
Yep.
or I called in someone else's address that I saw a bulky item, something that was in a yard, that is going against that property. It's not something that goes to the person that calls
Okay.
something in.
Okay, so I know you've been at a number of neighborhood meetings with me where people complain that their neighbors just pull stuff to the curb, nobody calls, and then they call and report it. Okay, so if my neighbor next door, Joan Adcock, pulls her commodes, et cetera, to the curb, and I report it, she's still going to be billed the $25 or whatever the cost is?
If it's her beyond her first included, yes.
Okay.
When someone calls in a location, the request can be called in by anyone anonymously. The pickup that we do where we physically do it in front of that house is where we're charging that either one-time included pickup, or if it's had others previously, that's when you start looking at billing them at that address.
Are you gonna notify Joan that you're gonna charge her to pick up the stuff in front of her house, or are you just gonna pick it up and then put it on her bill?
Well, remember, if it's her first time, she doesn't get billed anything.
Yeah, but she does it all the time.
And
So-
she's going to get a postcard from us that says, we picked something up at your address. You only get one a year. And we've sent these out already this year. I know some of y'all have had
And
phone
that's-
calls from
That's
from
before you
residents.
pick it up or after you pick
That's
it up?
after we pick it up.
Okay,
Because you get one included.
okay,
So there's no bill the first time.
okay. So what if the behavior from the residents drive them to where they put it in their backyard instead of the front of their homes?
That becomes a code issue.
Okay. Okay, so, I supported this because I felt like that if we had 83% of our population was not impacted by this, because many of them didn't even call for the first pickup, or they had one pickup. Plus the fact that I knew you needed new equipment, new employees. By the way, have you got new equipment, new employees?
We are working on the employees. We think we have about 2/3 of them hired. The vehicles that we have ordered, those will start appearing the next, probably, I think March is when we start getting the first shipments of trucks, and the second shipment's probably another month or two after that.
Okay. I guess my concern is the neighbors are still going to report this. Are you doing anything proactive to gather this stuff up out of the neighborhoods prior to a neighbor reporting it?
Well, when our trash collection is going through, we've emphasized to them multiple times that if you see stuff out, take a photo of it and turn it in when you get back. We're tracking it that way. Code enforcement has also been very active in turning these in. They're in the neighborhoods all the time. So there's been an effort by us to identify stuff that's out so we can get it collected.
So the drivers have access to put this into a computer?
No, they're actually identifying an address that has something out. They aren't inputting it. We want them driving and picking up trash. That's their primary thing.
Okay.
But if they stop to pick up trash out of the cart and they see something in that yard, we want them to note that address so we can make sure if it's not already in the system.
How
it
do
gets put
they
in the
note
system.
that address?
They have a notepad right there on their truck. They can write down the address.
Okay. So we still have the ability for the neighbors to pay attention to what's going on in their neighborhood, and you guys will respond to that. And then you also are being proactive to pick up the items
Yes,
as
ma'am.
well. You put them in the 311 system and then go back and get them.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So when did you start with this new system and this new process?
We had it in place and up and running January 1.
Okay.
And I can tell you quickly, apologize, let me flip to this page. Year to date, we've had 3,445 on-call requests already.
Through today?
Well, actually, yesterday is when I got this
Yesterday.
number yesterday afternoon.
How does that compare with what we were doing previously?
Similar numbers.
Similar, okay. So there's not been a behavior change?
Not yet, because we've sent out notices, the postcards to those that have used the system. We haven't started take that back. We have.
So these would be second pickups?
We've had one address this year has already had 7 requests. It's the same one that had 28 last year. We've had.
And have they been billed for $25 plus?
We have not started billing yet. We wanted to make sure that we had the word out, that people know about it. We wanted to minimize I had no idea about this excuse.
Yeah, I think it's created a lot of confusion though, so.
I understand.
Yeah, okay. So you've not billed anybody yet. When do you propose to start billing?
Right now, the tentative date is March 1st.
March 1st, okay. If I remember when you brought this to us several months back, the $25 was compared to what it would cost someone to be hired to pick the stuff up and then take it to the landfill. The tipping fee is what?
The tipping fee is $30 a ton. $30 a ton you weigh yourself when you go across. And what was the minimum? Yeah, the minimum to go across is $25, so it matches really what we're talking about. Because most of this is not going to equal a ton.
It was comparable to what a person, or maybe even less than what a person would have to pay if they took care of it themselves.
Correct.
Okay, I heard some horror stories about being billed $500 for picking up some trees or something. Are you familiar with a story like that?
We have allowed people to pay us that type of money to pick up large amounts of trees, yes.
Okay.
You remember, we have 6 inches in diameter,
Yeah.
6 feet long. So if someone cuts down a tree and they pile that tree at the curb, they have to pay to have that removed. It's not part of this solid waste fee.
So it's an estimate of whatever they have there?
It's based on the same $25 cubic yard and then $10 cubic yard after. So if we bring out the knuckle boom and fill it up, we basically have a volume that we estimated, and that's how we come up with that bill.
Okay, we have a lot of trees in Southwest, and I know in some other areas there's a lot of trees as well. And I never did get a straight answer from you about storm damage in regards to whether the city was going to honor storm damage and pick that up at no cost.
Well, storm damage, when it's a declared disaster, I think that's the definition we're using for storm damage.
Declared by?
Either the state or the federal government as a disaster.
Okay. We've had some storm damage, and I don't think they really cared that we had what we had going on.
But I guess the way we look at that is every heavy downpour can cause limbs to fall out or a partially dead tree to fall. It's hard for us to say, was that caused by this?
But you could have a
particular
tornado
storm?
come through. We had a tornado come through in Southwest at one point last year. It wasn't even recognized that it was coming, and there was a lot of trees that were damaged from that. There was no declaration or any of that sort of thing, but there definitely were trees down. They were across the roads.
I think if we have a certified tornado event that occurs where they actually come out, the National Weather Service says this was a tornado, I think that would count as something that's been declared
But
as
not straight line winds?
No, ma'am.
Micro burst?
No, ma'am.
Okay, but if it was a declared tornado, then
I think we can work around that.
Work
yes.
around that.
That's a pretty identifiable thing.
well, they come out to determine whether it's a tornado or microburst or whatever. So you wouldn't even recognize that?
I don't think so.
Okay, that's an issue. We have a lot of trees.
The entire city has a lot of trees.
Yeah, I get it. Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Director Hendricks.
Oh, I wanted to ask you, have you experienced where a tenant moves out, nobody's called, and I'm telling you what I see every day, and how do you all handle that?
Well, for where it'll be under the same rules here. It's based on how much volume gets put out there. That will get
So
charged.
you contact the landlord?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, okay.
The name on the property is the one that gets these bills.
That's great. Because, boy, it's a lot of that.
Let's stay in order of questions, everyone. Let's stay in order. Director Wright, then Director Hines next.
That prompted another question. I don't want to lose that thought. Don't let me lose that. But I do want to get to this.
Okay.
Back in October, I took a neighborhood tour with you and the city manager and the usual entourage.
Okay.
And one of the things that we determined was that your trash pickup guys are not putting this stuff in the 311 system. That's
Okay.
not happening. Now, I've watched them pick up trash. And I'm going to be frank, I want them to focus on picking up trash. I don't think that they need to be having to stop. I've actually gotten complaints from people, y'all don't pick my stuff up on time. You got people that sit down at home and watch the garbage truck go by and how fast it's going and, this kind of foolishness. And then they'll send you 99 questions, and I forward some of them
Yes, ma'am.
on.
Yes, ma'am.
And, give me an explanation for this. I know how to push that aside, but I know that a lot of these sites, because I go around and I take pictures and I submit them myself, and we'll take these tours and you'll see these big mounds of stuff that has never been turned in. Well, how are you going to address that? Is this additional staff that you're going to get? Will they be? Because I don't think your trash people to pick
ma'am.
on the garbage truck need to be doing that.
We've got to rely on multiple people to help us get this information placed into our system. We're going to rely on our truck drivers. If they see it, if they're stopping, dumping a cart, and they see a pile, we want them to write that address down that there's an on-call bulk.
And you saying they actually have a tablet in that truck with them?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
They can have a yellow notepad right there.
Oh, no, a yellow notepad. They don't have a tablet like this.
No. They're not.
Oh, okay.
They're not entering it into the. They're writing down an address when they get back. They give that to staff in the office to enter into the system that there's an on-call at that location. They're not.
See, when
they're
you
not
say
sitting there
tablet,
typing
I'm
in.
automatically
I'm sorry,
thinking this
that
thing
was-
here, and
that was
I
not-
know that's not going to happen.
No,
It's
ma'am.
just not
No,
going to
ma'am.
happen.
We're not asking them to do that. no.
Okay, good.
Just jot down the address when you get back, turn it in so we can get it in the system if it's not already in the system. So we're asking for our drivers to help us with that. We're asking for citizens that see it. We're asking for housing code enforcement folks that are in the neighborhoods to enter it. They do it a lot because you can go in and see who's entering stuff in. We can see who's doing it. And the people that are putting out themselves, they're the ones that are ultimately responsible to put this in. That's who we're wanting to let us know that it's out there so we can get it picked up and it doesn't sit out there very long.
Well, we had a major problem in Broadmoor with this, and we did a special outreach to them where the code enforcement officers just did it in quadrants, just driving down the street. Anything that wasn't in there, they put it in and then left a door knocker. Remember, we met
Yes.
about all
Oh, yeah.
this. It was just that bad in Broadmoor. It was like you couldn't even drive through the neighborhood without all this clutter. Okay, so I'm going to continue to do what I do.
Ma'am.
And monitor this, take my pictures, and I'm going to observe, Mayor, and make sure that the areas that are hardest to police as far as this is concerned don't get double whammied here, because we've worked long and hard on this for many, many years to get these neighborhoods cleaned up so that you can get people to move in and not feel like they moving into some place where nobody wants to live. Okay, then my other thing, the landlords, these single-family rent houses. So you said the person that owned the property is going to receive the bill for the pickup, but that's not the person that got the bill. It's the tenant that moved away.
Right, but we have the ability to see who's on the water bill. So let's say someone lives in a house for 5 months.
Mm-hmm.
They move out. The landlord comes in and dumps everything out.
Mm-hmm.
We collect that.
Yeah, but that person, but the bill that you got is
right
in that person, in my name, and I'm gone.
Right.
I'm not saying I shouldn't be forced to pay it.
Someone's got to have that water meter in their name during that time.
Not necessarily, John. Until a new tenant moves in.
If we have a location that's repetitively dumping, just emptying it out on the street. We're going to do everything we can to figure out who owns the property, not living in it, and make sure they are getting these bills for dumping things out. If it's not the person, let's say it's someone's a renter where they're making the person that rent get the water meter in their name or their utilities in their name. If we find out that the person that we send a bill to is no longer the one living there, it's someone new, we're going to work with that person so they don't have to bill, but we're going to go find the landowner to make sure that they're paying that bill.
Okay, I just want you to know I'm going to watch this very closely.
That's something that we have discussed at length, trying to figure out the best way for those unique scenarios like that of how we're going to approach this.
Because most rental properties, single-family rental properties, the person that moving in there got to turn on the utilities in their name. The landlord's not going to do that. So when I move out of that house, I've gone to Cherry Creek to live, and the person is landlord pulling all this stuff out. That meter is not in his name. It's just there in the last person's name.
So we're working through how to make sure we're getting it to that right person in that scenario.
Okay. So, but these are real world issues.
Yes, ma'am. We're very conscious of that particular scenario.
Okay. Thank you so much for changing that roll-off dumpster thing, because the neighborhood association just was not going to take responsibility.
And if I can just speak to that for just a second, that was an effort on us to try to bring that back to. It's the community efforts that are getting access to this service, because that's what it was originally created for. We were seeing it going further and further away from that, and it was individuals that were calling and scheduling as many as they could for a year.
And I agree with what you did here. This makes sense.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, neighborhood association 8 times a year. When they put those out there, you can see them, you can dump them. But if you want one individually, then you can get only one. Now, that makes sense.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much. Director Hines.
Try to keep my comments. So, on your sheet, you said oversized yard waste and uncontained solid waste collected. So there's no free one time on that, right?
Correct. That's correct.
So if I get something that they can't pick up on the regular yard waste.
Well, that's stuff that's oversized. So if you go cut a bunch of limbs, cane or something that's small diameter, not real long, and you have it across the entire front of your yard, that's no charge for that. That's when you have the large tree trunks.
When I've got to have the knuckle boom.
Yeah, stuff that we can't pick up
clarify.
by hand is what that's about.
So, John, I know you, and I've talked with Ronnie about this, especially on some of the roll-off stuff and everything. So I think at the end of the day, we had a lot. I know that some of us had some complaints about the increase in the yard waste pickup, this year, and then we're doing it. But it seems like we're actually recouping some costs that that our ratepayers were subsidizing, that 17% are causing 83% of the pickups. So what's the projection over time? Do you guys think this has a net positive? So the next time in 10 years when we have to look at rate increases that shouldn't be incrementally as much, based on the fact that we're recouping some of our costs for stuff we've been doing that other ratepayers have been subsidizing? So
that's part of it. Obviously, the 25 is probably not covering the cost of what that is. But there's also, we hope, some behavior change where customers are not going to be putting out a couple small items that could have easily fit in their trash can, but instead they stick them out in the front of their yard, and we have to do a separate drive-by with another truck to pick that up because it's not in their garbage can. So we're hoping for a behavior change. If they have to pay for that, they're just going to put it in their trash can next time.
So here's the next question. I don't know that anybody's answered it. As they say, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, and our intentions are good here, but there are some pitfalls anytime we make changes like this, that people's behavior changes for the worse and not for the better. So what's the timelines you guys are going to look at as far as evaluation, so we don't get a problem where we've got people illegally dumping, that kind of thing? Because that's what I see, is that it may not seem like a lot. I guarantee you a bulky item pickup, if I got more than one a year, I'd be more than happy to pay $25 to have them come haul off a refrigerator or something. That way I don't have to lug it to. $25 is a lot more than my time is worth, more than having to run all the way out to the dump to do something like that. So
I think, and illegal dumping is something that, along with the billing issue, that's something that we've thought about a lot. Obviously, we're going to keep tracking these numbers as they come in. We're going to be looking at who's doing multiple, where are they doing those multiples, are those numbers being lowered, are we seeing more dumping going on in certain areas? So we're going to try and track that the best we can to see, is that shifting somewhere else instead of just putting it out and now I have to pay for it? Am I just going to take it somewhere else and dump it?
And if I was a betting man, which I've been known to bet on some things, I'd be willing to bet that our guy with the 28 pickups, he's probably your most likely candidate once he starts getting charged to start dumping it someplace illegally.
Well, that one's a unique. Well, I'm not going to say too much about it here
Right. You
on
don't have
camera,
to.
but yeah, that one. I don't know if that one will, but there's probably some others that you might see.
Hopefully that list is short and you can focus on tires. Yeah.
Director Adcock, unless Director Hines has any more questions.
John, when do we get a handout that we can pass out at neighborhood meetings? Because that's what they're asking for. They want something in their hand. And I know it's easy to sit up here and say they can go online, they can go to 311. When are we going to get a handout that we can hand out?
I can after we have this, I'll take some of the information off these slides, put them on a one-page thing that I can send out all the resource centers, community centers. I can email everybody here a copy of that so you have copies of it. And then I know also that Lamar and his team are working on some other PR news release type information that we're going to put out there to advertise this to make people more aware of it also. So
Last night I was out East Little Rock in a neighborhood. There were 7 piles laying on the vacant lots. And this does not address anything about vacant lots, so tell us about the piles on vacant lots.
we are still picking up those piles on vacant lots if it's out by the street. If it's back up on the property, now it goes into a code enforcement illegal dumping on private property. So it sort of switches out of our purview.
These started out 3 months ago as all yard waste, and now they're mixed piles because as everybody drives by, they're throwing more and more on them.
Well, and part of the issue now that we have the ability to, well, technically if they're not a customer, they don't pay a solid waste bill, it's a vacant lot, there is no service that we're providing. However, we have been going by and getting that stuff if it's out by the road, if we can.
Is that going to continue?
Yes, it will probably continue. Yes, ma'am.
At no charge, because there's no one to bill.
We don't have one, unless we go to that property owner and cite them through our code enforcement for a nuisance violation of having that material on their property.
Right.
That's really our only avenue to notify them and then cite them and take them to court.
In lots of cases, they're not the one that cut it and put it there.
That's probably, but it's still their property, so you have responsibility for your
Now,
your
I
property.
agree with Director Wyrick. Storm damage, I've still got 2 trees I'm having to have cut up. I've already contracted, though, they're going to haul them off. But they was at the high winds about 4 Fridays ago, and I know lots of my neighbors had damage then. So I wish you would relook at that, declared by state or federal, because, you know, usually those people are elderly, low-income people that cannot afford to pay a tree service, and they're putting it out to themselves. And us billing them $300, $400, $500 is not going to help them at all. The other one, with all this, are we going to have the landfill open 1 or 2 Saturdays a month so individuals can choose to take it out there themselves?
Still 1 Saturday a month that we have it open right now.
What Saturday is that?
Yeah, well, with holiday and everything else, it shifts, but we should have that online, I believe. And I can get you a list for this
Would you
calendar
make
year
sure
as well.
in the handouts that we're going to have that is one of the items in the handout?
Yeah.
Is that when the landfill is open and what they need to bring with them if they're hauling things out there?
Sure.
Director Wright, did you have a question?
Yes. Quick, this may not be for you, but it impacts you.
Mm-hmm.
The house next door to me, not next door, down the street, was remodeled. And they didn't have a dumpster. They just put this stuff on the curb. And I called it in, so, Eventually, after about 2 weeks, staff came out and talked to them and told them they had to remove it, which they did. But they finished up, and there's another pile there. Not as big, but it's there now. They've been done now for 3 weeks.
Okay.
Okay, if they're getting a permit to remodel, can we not provide them with information on pickup and what they have to do to keep this job site?
Sure. I can get, Jamie snuck out of here, but I can get with Jamie and we can discuss some information that we can give.
Because they got to pay for the permit. They can just put a flyer or something, attach it to all the other stuff that they have to comply with. And I think that would help keep these remodelers from just piling stuff on the side of the street.
Yes, ma'am. I will get with him and we'll work on that.
Vice Mayor Wyrick.
That's my last question. Mr. Honeywell, you said you were going to start billing in March. Will it be for the month of March, or on the 1st of March, will you back bill from the beginning of this process till then?
We have not made a determination of that yet. We are keeping track of, like I said before, we know how many we've had, how many are multiple already. But since we've said we're going to wait till March 1st, the odds are we'll probably start March 1st that's the start date for this calendar year, is what I'm anticipating.
Okay. So
to avoid, because it gets very confusing for you.
Yeah.
You know, we picked yours up on February 29th, and now it's March 1st, so does that count? Not yet. So.
Okay. So I'm thinking that this board probably needs an update from maybe your first billing or some sort of information that we can talk to our folks about. Because I figure after that first bill comes out, there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be caught off guard. So I think we probably need some follow-up.
Okay.
Maybe not the end of March, but somewhere after your first billing to let us know if 83% were truly not impacted.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
Thank you so much, Director Honeywell, for taking this time with the board to share this information as we continue to work towards educating the public about this new change as we move forward. So thank you for that. And let's just shoot, if we are going to start March 1st, tentatively, let's look at having a report back by June 1st. So that way we get a couple of months to see how things are going. And if we need to make any changes, we still can kind of be on the swivel for the second half of the year.
You bet. Thank you.
With that being said, are there any more questions from the board on any other unrelated topics before we adjourn? What is the meaning of life? I'm sure we could talk forever about the meaning of life. This meeting is now, yes, ma'am, briefly before I head to another meeting. Meeting adjourned.